Yes, perfect. I think everything is working well. So again, welcome everyone who is here with us in Zoom, and also everyone that is watching us via our social media channels. I'm glad to introduce today's informal discussions titled Some Insights into COP28, What is Happening on the Ground. And this discussion in these sessions will try to understand a little bit better the nexus between climate change and militarism, and specifically what is happening these days during the COP in Dubai, thanks to our amazing speakers that are joining us from there. Maybe a little introduction. My name is Emily Molinari, and I'm working for the International Peace Bureau, who is hosting today's wonderful event. For the people who don't know the International Peace Bureau yet, we are one of the oldest NGOs in the world working in the peace movement, and maybe our work can be summarized with our motto, which is disarmament for sustainable development. And we are active in many campaigns and many projects, but since I don't want to take too much time telling you about our work, maybe we'll just post in the chat our website. And if you're curious, feel free to reach out, and we welcome every new question and member of the International Peace Bureau. But I would like to mention one thing, and that's one of the main goal of IPB is building networks around the world. And I think today's event is the manifestation of this work. And in fact, this discussion has been jointly organized with other partners. We like the Tipping Point North-South, the Transnational Institute, Scientists for Global Responsibility, Stop Wapenhandel, and the Women's International Link for Peace and Freedom. And similarly, in the last 2 weeks, we held other events, 2 webinars, for example, also around the topics that we will see today. One was mostly about a report, the Climate Crossfire report, how NATO's 2% military spending targets contribute to climate breakdown. And we had another event before that also around the role of NATO in these issues. So if you haven't seen the report or missing the webinars, we'll post also the link to that into the chat. So you all have the resources if you are curious and you want to hear more about these topics. But coming back to today's focus, we will hear from 4 speakers directly from Dubai, and we will hear at COP. But before turning to Dubai, I would like to introduce the first contribution, which will be from Nico Edwards. Nico is a PhD candidate in international relations at the University of Sussex in the United Kingdom, and also advisor to Scientists for Global Responsibility and author of a very new report with the World Peace Foundation named Resisting Green Militarism, Building Movements for Peace and Eco-Social Justice, which we'll be also sharing to the chat. And she will provide a brief introduction, specifically about the nexus of militarism and climate change, and explain us why it is so important that we are having this conversation today and in general, and why it is important to address these issues. So yeah, I think Nico, if you're ready, the floor is yours.
Fantastic. Thanks, Emily. And hi to everyone and a warm welcome. For someone like me stuck in my home in London, getting most of my updates from COP from Twitter, it's great to be able to hear from you, some of you directly on the ground, about what is happening to address these links in Dubai. So I'll just, as Emily said, start us off with a very brief, a few thoughts on how these issues are linked. and why we care about them, right? For anyone who might not be too familiar with the topic. And anything I mention now, I'm going to be sharing loads of resources in the chat so that people can read on afterwards. How does militarism escalate climate breakdown? And what's anti-militarism got to do with climate justice, right? Well, the links are many and varied, as we know. Military emissions are estimated to account for 5.5% of total global carbon emissions. The US military is the single largest institutional consumer of fossil fuels and producer of carbon emissions in the world. Military interests, in turn, have helped shape the global dependence on oil, causing wars, geopolitical strife, and an unimaginable harm to people and ecologies across the past century and beyond, of course. While military spending is a key driver of greenhouse gas emissions and also diverts seriously needed funds away from climate finance and climate action. Strikingly, however, which is why we're here today, both military emissions and military spending are still missing from high-level COP agendas. Military emissions reporting even remain exempt from carbon reduction targets. The links, however, go beyond emissions and spending. So alongside active warfighting, the extraction of military minerals, the production of weapons, and the maintenance of military institutions and industries also in peacetime have immense social and ecological costs that undermine work towards eco-social justice across the globe. And at a time when the need for non-military responses to eco-social crisis have perhaps never been greater, we're instead seeing military sectors stepping up as so-called climate actors, attempting to effectively hijack the green transition. Things, however, are happening at COP, which is what we'll hear about from our speakers today. And only between COP26 in Glasgow a few years ago till today, the amount of events inside the blue zone, where the official country delegates participate, that address military and climate justice links have gone from perhaps 0 or 1 to more than 6 high-level events. So this year we've seen events such as on feminist and grassroots visions for anti-militarist gender and climate justice, or on the carbon costs of war and military infrastructures, or how to address military spending as part of the debate on loss and damage. So today, as Emily said, we'll hear directly from activists and practitioners working to move military issues up the climate action agenda at COP, and working hard to foreground demilitarization, among other causes, as a strategy for climate justice. Thank you. I'm greatly looking forward to this conversation, and I'll be bombarding, pun intended, the chat with resources on these links. Back to you, Emily.
Thank you so much, Nico, for this introduction. And yeah, I just post also some resources into the chat so people can also read the report. And maybe now it's time to hear directly from our colleagues in Dubai, if it's okay, and if Deborah can speak, because I was seeing in the chat that she has a bit of technical trouble. Deborah, can you hear us? Can you speak?
Nope. Oh, I think I can. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Oh, yeah. Now I see you.
Okay, that's great.
That's great. Okay.
My laptop temporarily crashed. I'm so sorry.
That's great that you can manage.
Okay.
So I'll just introduce you very briefly.
Thank
yes.
you.
So now we will hear from Deborah Burton from the Tipping Point North South, and she is the co-founder of Tipping Point North South, and she manages their primarily policy and advocacy project, Transform Defense. And she is in Dubai, and whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm just
so
moving from the floor to a chair.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, there we go. Okay, that's better. Okay.
That's amazing.
Fine. Okay, thank you for your patience. Oh my God, I feel like I'm in the 19th century. Okay, and I'm not hearing anything through these ears, but never mind.
Don't worry.
All right, now let's go. Okay.
Great. Can you hear us now?
I can hear everything.
Great. So whenever you're ready, you can start.
Well, as Nico said, it feels like we're off the scale in terms of events here at COP. And I sound like a bit of a broken record, but last year I often say, events will come to meet you. Events will come to meet you, and the people who are ready will step into the space that's created. And it's usually not great events. So the event that came to meet us last year was Ukraine. And that's why media were in the room. This year, it's Gaza. And the difference between the two is that for Ukraine, it was very much a mainstream. The mainstream were coming in to listen to side events and talk about military missions through the lens of Ukraine. This year, Gaza, I wouldn't say it's everywhere, but it's getting more and more and more. It is definitely, it's there. It's definitely there. And Gaza is the conflict, I think, that has brought the activist community into this topic of military missions and military spending. So that's the first thing to say. And it means that this whole plethora of events that have been happening, from official side events to pavilion events, I'm speaking from our own, they've been well attended. The engagement has been high in terms of the people in the room. There's been very good media coverage. It just feels like we are speaking to an audience here at COP in terms of activists who completely get what we're saying now. So you're seeing military spending and climate finance, those two things together, popping up all over the place. From the Eco newsletter, which is the environmental NGO letter that goes out, military spending is there. It was in Sharm el Sheikh actually last year. They covered it last year. They covered it again this year. It's coming up at Climate Action Network meetings. It just feels like we have, in all sorts of ways, we have kind of crossed a threshold. Maybe I'll leave it there and hand over to Rula and Nesmah to talk about our side events and that we were all together and that went very well. Maybe I'll just stop there.
Okay, thank you, Deborah, for these first words. And yeah, I don't want to break the flow too much. So if Nesmah and Rula want to keep the thoughts that Deborah was once mentioning about the side events, please go ahead. Thank you so much. I'll just introduce you very briefly so everybody knows who you are. So now we will have the pleasure to listen to Nesmah Mansoor Ali from the Yemeni Peace Track Initiative. And she's the founding member of the Yemeni Peace Track Initiative and woman peace and security expert specializing in peace building and climate justice.
So when we...
Deborah, can you turn off your mic? Sorry. Thanks. And she's participating also at COP with the WILPF delegation. And Rula Asad, she is from the Syrian Female Journalist Network, a feminist researcher, journalist, and co-founder also of the Syrian Female Journalist Network. And she's participating also at COP with the WILPF delegation. And we are super glad that you are here with us today. So please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Emily. Thanks a lot, everyone. So I will also bombard you with a link, but the link is one of the main things we have been, I myself, like within the umbrella and of WILPF and the WGC, working on. So basically, as part of the MENA task force of this year, we have worked on the demand document that you see here. So the demands, the document has 28 key demands. We wanted it to be catchy, so COP 28 demand to make people like remember it. And each thematic followed different areas. So talking about militarization and demilitarization, we have this part, but it did not only focus on demilitarization because we are in a region that is in ongoing conflict. So the region, the status of the region is very different. So we have countries where we have ongoing conflicts such as Yemen, as Syria, but we have countries who are one of the main importers of arms. We have countries. So this is I would say for me it has been the document that I've been using in my advocacy, in all of the meetings, trying to push it. My colleagues today had meeting with the Arab League group to try to push the demands, but you know, when it comes to militarization, so I would say that our side event, I focused about around everything, like addressing gender-based violence, addressing the intersectionality of this issue, looking at it from also within the frameworks of women, peace and security, youth, peace and security, looking at it as also putting obligation on the emissions reporting, but also the diversion of resources from care economy towards military economy, as we have countries that spend up to 7.5% of their GDP on arms and arms import. So this has been like the dynamic. I would say that beyond these spaces where I talk about militarization, because I talk about it from feminist perspective, gendered perspective, so people would come and because it's very taboo in here, and we have like all the media that is in place in the country, they don't want to talk about it. They always ask me about the gendered impact of the conflict. Can you explain it? So it has been mainly educating people. I would call it feminism or gender 101, basically explaining in detail to people. So right now I feel that in general, from my experience, this is my first COP. The COP is like a very strange place for me. I am someone who works on peace building, so talk about me about like track 1, track 2, all of this terminology is what I know the best. So but what I see that as I told you, like this is in this strange space, what I've been doing is educating about the gender impact, but it's for the climate justice. Like journalists said to my face and people said to my face, it's you know, it's we cannot talk about this like publicly, like to echo the messages. So I feel that what is going to happen is very low profile advocacy with the Arab countries, try to push with the negotiators, but putting it at a more widespread what is happening, because you know lots of media, but they will not touch up on this issue, even though like I'm actively talking about it. Yeah.
It's also my first COP. It's massive, it's big, and actually the space it's allow for many things to happen. And I think the side event that WILPF organized, it was really a success, because a lot of information and a lot of human rights center story have been put to the space. The analysis also, as Nesmah said, between the gender perspective and demilitarization have been also created. But I think when also the space allowed for some activism, which is some group and collective, they organize a small demonstration or an act in the public space, and also with WILPF, we were part of the public event in demilitarization. We brought the elephant to the room. So also it was also kind of catching the attention for several media, but also for some people like passing and asking about the elephant in the room. Along with at the same day, there were also a small article and ECHO have been also highlighted the issue. My impression also that I had the chance to follow a little bit on just transition, and there's a few terms have been come. Do you want to say anything, Emily?
No, I was just worried that your connection broke for a second, but everything is fine. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Actually, the care economy, but also no one be left behind. It's one of the terms also have been used a lot in the just transition. Also to center human rights in that perspective. Also the criticism around the loss and damage, about like how to include the country have been impacted like environmentally by the climate. Also it's in this space. along also with the criticism about the process. We know it's a start, and this is what many parties they want to focus on, but also the feminists in the space trying to also bring the criticism like how this can happen, and if this is the start, what that mean, etc., etc. So my impression, all in all, that the civil society, feminist practitioner, they managed to bring the human rights perspective to all the topics, in particular demilitarization. Because it have been quite challenging also, as Nesmah said, to really bring it and to try to push a little bit for public discussion around it, or how to link it with other also topics related to climate justice.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Yeah, I've already seen some thumb up and people saying yes. So it's amazing to hear that you were able to bring some knowledge, so to say, and to educate people on topics that maybe they were not that present before. I think this is the whole concept of being there and trying to mobilize people. And I was smiling when you were mentioning the elephant in the room. It's always a great symbol, and it's something that call attention. So it's definitely a good strategy to bring it concretely into the room and to show it to people. But maybe before opening this discussion, I'm sure there will be some comments, but I would like also to hear from Mitzi. Yes, I see her again. Mitzi, are you still connected? Great, okay, so amazing. So I'll introduce also briefly Mitzi to everybody. Mitzi Jonelle Tan, she's a full climate justice activist based in Metro Manila in the Philippines, and she is the convener and international spokesperson of Youth Advocates for Climate Action Philippines, that the Fridays for Future movement in the Philippines. And we are also very happy to have her joining us here. And she's also in Dubai in the green zone. So please, Mitzi, we're happy to hear from you, from your perspective too.
Hi everyone. Thank you so much for having this, because I think it's so important that the conversation that happened, I don't know if you can hear me because it's windy, that happened here at the UN Climate Summit or at the COP doesn't stay within our spaces. It's so important that the decisions being made here, or not being made even, are brought into the wider public at home. So this is such an important and crucial event. I've had the privilege of being able to be with some of our speakers just a few days ago on a panel that focused a lot on the militarization. I've seen that has been some of the most nourishing and important conversations that I've experienced, because we're really seeing how more and more people are now seeing the interconnection of climate justice and peace and militarization. And it's always too late. But it's good that it's starting now. And I've heard such inspiring stories from so many women, especially in this field, talking about the much needed reallocation and redirection of military finance into climate finance, for example, and also looking at the emissions and looking at the global stock take, ensuring that military emissions are something that's included in the final outcomes. And in the next few days, we're going to be seeing a lot of that. As usual with the COP, it's been 1 week, and yet we still haven't seen actual progress, in the sense that everyone is still negotiating, debating, and the smallest word in the article, in the text, can change so much. Like when I'm recalling what happened in COP26 in Glasgow, the difference between a fossil fuel phase out and a fossil fuel phase down meant such a big difference for communities on the front lines. And it will be the same again this year when we're talking about fossil fuel phase out, when we're talking about adaptation, loss and damage, reparations, but also the military emissions, the human rights aspect of the climate crisis. I am again seeing like a lot of progress. This year was also the very first time, I think someone mentioned it earlier, the very first time that we had a peace and human rights day at COP as a thematic or as a theme. which means that, world leaders and key stakeholders are really starting to finally feel the pressure that civil society has been pushing on for years. And it's so crucial to have people be brought together. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the climate justice movement move more into the peace and human rights movement as well, because I feel like the peace and human rights movement, they have been talking about the climate crisis and the impacts, but the climate movement has been a little bit more separate. And as someone who started in the climate movement but has always done it in a human rights perspective, I'm trying to like bring like my people towards this side as well. And I think it's really important. It's also really interesting. Is that the word to use? Or like, I don't know what word to use, but a lot of pro-nuclear activists are walking around these spaces in their blue shirts, and they're like, let's talk about nuclear. And I'm scared. I'm scared of those conversations, because we have seen how it is a weapon of mass destruction. And we're also saying now that the fossil fuel is a weapon of mass destruction. And yet they're still both like really playing it up here in climate spaces. And so that's also something that we need to look at because of the history of how nuclear has been used by countries. Even if, like with the Manhattan Project, the scientists that started it, they told them that we're only doing this just so that we have the power to do it, but we're not going to actually use it. Right. And that's what they told the scientists. And then once the scientists found out that they were actually going to use it, and they actually learned more about the technology, they became some of the largest voices against it. And so that's something that as climate justice and peace advocates, we also need to really put our attention to in this fight for a climate just world. And it seems like there's so much, right? There's a lot happening. There's a lot happening all at the same time. But I am so comforted by the fact that there's so many of us doing different things. And there are moments where we do come together and really stand strong together. Tomorrow, I'm looking forward to the Global Day of Action. There is a protest that's going to be happening, led by cross-constituency of civil society. This morning, we had the youth protest, and we marched, and we didn't break the rules, but we bent the rules a little bit by walking together. So it became a march, but we were really just walking. So that was a really powerful moment, and it really reinvigorated me to keep going for this second week of COP, which is so important, because we still have a lot to really watch and focus on to ensure that we can keep fighting this fight. Something that Deborah actually said in the panel a few days ago really gave me a new perspective and hope, where the climate crisis might be finally the thing that gets demilitarization to happen. And it's sad that it had to take the climate crisis for this to happen, and not, the millions and billions of people's lives that have been lost because of this, the oppression that's happened. But finally, we do have something towards that direction. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Thank you so much, Mitzi. It was really, really inspiring to hear from you too. I think everybody agree on that. And yeah, you're right. This is my personal view. I'm also seeing that slowly but steady, the peace movement and the climate movement are coming together. And I think it's something very powerful, and we will need to find a way to bring everybody together and use this strength to for the common goal that is demilitarization. And it's really inspiring to see that's happening also there. And somehow it was also like a great way to give a little bit more of hope we can do something. And this is also one of the goals of these sessions, these webinars or discussions, is really to bring people here together, activists, but also people that maybe are not aware of it's happening, but they would like to do something. And as you were saying, it's important to networking, and we really hope to help in these regards. And it's very inspiring to hearing from you all. And maybe, I don't know if we could start the session of questions from the participants. If anybody wants to say or share some comments, feel free to do so. You can use the hand raise button, or just wave your hand, I'll call you. Or if you don't feel like talking, you can just write your question in the chat, and then I can read it for you. But I already see Sean with the hand. Do you want to go first?
Maybe first you can take, it looks like we have a question in the chat that I think Mitzi's already answered a little bit, but maybe we open it up to the other speakers. I can read that and then maybe add my own, and we can get the floor over. But I think that question from Angela is, what's happening on the ground with pro-nuclear? It was mentioned people in t-shirts. Is there a big presence? I think Mitzi started to answer that in the chat, but maybe there's, I don't know if there's some further comments or if anyone wants to comment further on that. Yeah, my question, maybe it's a bit complicated here, but I think a lot of people who don't attend the COP, myself in person, I haven't been to one up till now, but there's a lot of a large impression that really the COP meetings are just talk with no real action. And I'm wondering, even, you know, they add in now militarism or peace as a theme, but I'm wondering how much really that will be actionable outside of the COP meetings, or what is needed outside to bring those more together. So it's not just that it's a mention at COP, but that it's an actual part of action plans in countries around the world. And semi-related to that is, you know, there is the talk around loss and damages, and the fund for loss and damage that was brought in, the main point of last year's COP. And now this year they have pledged 700 million US dollars, which is less than 0.2% of the money that is needed, according to an article from The Guardian that I pulled up from a couple days ago. Meanwhile, military spending, of course, is at over $2 trillion. So again, this seems more like action. Yes, excuse me, more like talk than actual action to put such little money into it. So how do we turn it from that talk into action? Thank you.
I'll pick up on the nuclear question, because I too have been shocked to see, when you wander around some of the pavilions, nuclear options are in the business sector. They're there. They're absolutely there. And we had a side event, a little pavilion event the other night, and Lindsay Fielder-Cook, who is the Quaker UN office representative here, and she sits as an observer for the Quakers on the IPCC. She was talking about the big push on carbon capture storage and solar radiation management, which I'd never heard of. Very much technologies that, of course, richer nations are going to be able to afford, everybody else. The technology push, I think, is something that we all have to be tuning into. It's a bit like the military and greenwashing. It's really getting a hold out there, and they have the resources to kind of put it into the public arena, such that technology is the answer. And that comes at the same time as Mitzi's talking about the global stocktake. And the job of the global stocktake is to tell us how close are we to 1.5? Are we overshoot? How much room for maneuver do we have, so that if we do overshoot, how do we rein back? How do we not get to 1.5? You see the global stocktake and where we are with estimates, and we are headed for 2 degrees. We are headed for 2 degrees. You put that alongside the big technology push, yeah, and it all adds up. It all adds up. So there will be. I think the default position now is technology. So that, along with how do we push back on the military greenwashing themselves? They can't go green. Not in our lifetimes, not ever. They can't go green. How do we? These are big topics, you know, yeah, they're big topics, and somehow we need to be kind of pushing back on them. I don't know if anybody wants to pick up on any of the other issues.
Maybe we give space to Mitzi, because she has her phone, right?
You want Mitzi? Do you want?
Mitzi, are you still here? Ah, yeah. I don't know if.
She's searching for a plug, so it might be
Yeah.
that she...
Yeah, maybe we wait a bit from to
Okay,
hear from
maybe
Mitzi. Yeah.
I can elaborate a bit of like the outcomes, etc. I think COP, as many of the multilateral spaces, it's very like, I would say, like in it's a French expression, so excuse me, like handicapped by the way it's designed. So we are reliant on the parties, which are our own governments, and their willingness to apply what is happening. So what is happening, like from the previous COPs to what, from my very like from my analysis, is that everyone wants to put the issues to like technology, as Deborah said, but also to financing. Like, we're going to fix the issue with putting money, with putting funds. But the problem is that it's not about putting money on putting funds. It's about your obligations and what is happening. And like with the big declaration on the first day with the loss and damage fund, etc., and the pledging, blah, blah, blah. Again, like we still don't know. Like right now, the loss and damage fund will be in the office of the International World Bank, and we have problem with these institutions anyway, because the question of debt, the question of these of the that there has to be reparation made. It's not like giving fund, giving money. It's also about paying the historical debt. So I think it's up upon the civil society beyond COP. I think these are the spaces that are way more important when it comes to putting pressure on our parties, talking about naming and shaming when needed, but also being strategic. So yeah, this is what I can add like on this issue of COP.
Thank you so much. I think, yeah, Deborah?
I was just going to say one small thing, because it's absolutely the right question to be asking, and I'm sure an awful lot of people who are here who are here as activists would ask the same question. Can I justify being here? Yeah. And I remember last year at Sharm el-Sheikh, Vanessa Nakati was responding to Greta, because Greta was saying we should all boycott, and we absolutely should. It's a revolting, in so many ways, revolting trade show, over-the-top trade show with 2,500 fossil fuel lobbyists, oil lobbyists. But Vanessa Nakati, in response to Greta, said, we have to be here. We can't not be here. Our governments are here. The negotiations are happening. You're allowed this limited room for maneuver in terms of demonstrations and acting. You can get your voice up. But the important thing to remember is the media cover that activism. The media want to see it. We've all been on the receiving end of media coverage, because they are looking for the counter to the establishment, to the mainstream. And so we are absolutely up against it in terms of companies and rich countries not ever doing the right thing. But the fact that we are here saying what we're saying across all of these issues, it took loss and damage 30 years, my God, 30 years. And now the fund has to be filled. But I would agree with Vanessa. I think as long as you can justify your being here, and you have a message to be here with, then you just have to find the resources and get here. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. And maybe, Ulla, you want to go? Hi, Ulla.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Ulla Klötzer from Finland, the newest NATO member country with the longest NATO border directly to Russia, which has made, of course, Russia a bit nervous. And we also have already reached the 2.2 part of the budget, and this is now the bottom. So we have to go further, like everybody, and that is leading in Finland to social misery. We have less money for education, we have less money for social security, for health business, and this is what we were talking in Madrid on a Green Left forum, actually a feminist workshop some weeks ago. the growing social misery in Europe, and people stealing food in shops. So I think I'm so glad that you are there raising the climate issue, but now we also have to raise the social misery issue. So it's really a big pot which is boiling. And Finland is unfortunately also fully pushing on nuclear power. We have the largest reactor in the world taken into use this year. We will be the first country in 1 or 1.5 years that take into use a repository for nuclear waste. And that means that the nuclear industry will say the problem is solved. Finland has solved the problem, we can go on. And then comes the SMR reactors, the small modular reactors. So we really have to be careful now with these guys in blue shirts running around in Dubai, because they are trying to push for more nuclear. Then I would say, yes, we have to continue fighting. And Women for Peace, together with WILPF US Women, last March made a coalition of Global Women for Peace united against NATO, because we see NATO as the elephant in the room, because NATO is the biggest CO2 emission military force. So we had a conference in Brussels, and now we are heading for Washington in July. The plans are already there, and people in the US are very active. So I wish that we could really be many people there. Because they will have a big celebration getting 75 years, NATO. And we have to show that NATO is one of the biggest elephants in the room. Thank you.
Thank you, Rula. And I think the next one in line is David. You're still muted.
Okay, I want to answer a bit. I am also in the COP. I'm from the French peace movement. And I'm David. I've been around the world with a solar bike for 5 years. So first for the nuclear weapon, and it was a big victory. And after I went to COP 15 of Montreal, and it was a big victory. And I want to talk about it because there is something very, very important that you should know that they don't want you to know. So, and it's quite linked to the nuclear spending. So what they don't want to talk about, that's there is 1 trillion. So last year, what happened at COP15 in Montreal, it was decided that $500 billion per year should be phased out from toxic subsidies to biodiversity, so killing life. So, and that's, I can send you the link if you want, but you can go on the website of the United Nations for COP15 and see the paper. So now there's this, I just sent the link from CNN. It's 1 minute 30, and you should really, really watch it, because what happened at the COP never happened before. It's in the world, there is the world gross product is about $100 trillion per year, and basically 14% of it, so 14 trillion is wasted. So 1 trillion go to damage biodiversity. $1 trillion is damaging the climate with fossil fuels, given to fossil fuel. And there is another $2 trillion is given to military spending. So that's the 2%. So that's, we have already 4%, and these 4% generate 10% of the world PIB on because of destruction. So we have 14% of the money of the planet has been is to kill the planet. So a woman, very courageous woman from Africa, she's just the general director of the World Trade Organization. She just spoke. Why are we spending this money to damage the planet, to damage the climate? So that's a big move. And now we have on the last 5 days, and like you say, we don't need billions, we need trillions. So we have the money, we have the solution, and yeah. So it's not, you should please share this information and go back to your negotiator of your country and saying, we want to phase out half of the toxic subsidy. That's going to be $600 billion per year. Okay, and then I have a small information. Peace Boat is going to do a presentation at Finland Pavilion. Pavilion is 71, Monday 11. So you are more than welcome. And that's it. So I think this COP can be very, very historical. Thanks.
Thank you, David, for sharing that too. I think Nico posted the agreement also in the chat, so for easy access for everybody. Thank you, Nico. And we still have a few minutes left. If anybody else wants to share some thoughts or comments, or even the speakers, if you happen to share something more.
I think, can I ask a question, Emily?
Of course.
Hijack the floor. I would just be really curious to hear, like you said, Nesmah, that there's a certain pushback from some actors in saying, we cannot publicly talk about these things, right? That there are certain things that are taboo still on the ground. And what I find with, like, yes, this year there's a certain emphasis also from high level on the links between conflict and climate change, the links between peace and the need for conflict sensitive analysis of these things, etc. But we're not talking root causes still. We're not actually talking what is causing this, right? We're still just mentioning symptoms, thinking that we can respond superficially, right? So I think my question would be, how do you come across on the floor with different kinds of actors that you engage with? If you take the word militarism in your mouth, right? Like, do people engage with that? Do they agree with you? Can they see that there's that's a root cause that we're not really addressing, or do they take issue with that framing, right? And it's more sort of pro-defense, pro-military, as in militarism is not even a thing, kind of jargon. I don't know if that makes sense. So it's more, do people engage with root causes?
Indeed, this was the conversation I had with Catherine when the day of relief, health and peace, we talked about this. So I will give the floor to Catherine to talk to you about it more. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'm not an official speaker, but I'm just sneaking in here. So to your question, I think the terminology is also something that is very triggering for almost all like leaders and decision makers. Like militarism and militarization is something that immediately is met with some kind of resistance. So I think using that word is tricky. However, what I want to say is that there have been some leaders that have made some mention of the root causes on this issue. For example, Rula in the opening plenary, he talked about, you know, how can we spend billions on war when we don't have enough for climate finance? So he made the connection to military spending. And then the foreign minister of Colombia during the launch of the peace declaration that Nesmah mentioned, which, as you say also, Nico, the declaration and the packages of solutions and stuff like that, it just looks at, which is important, right? It looks at, you know, channeling more finances to conflict affected countries that are also affected by the climate crisis, but doesn't look at all of the root causes. However, during this launch event, the foreign minister of Colombia did also talk about the need for, you know, if we don't talk about global peace and global cooperation, all of what we're talking here about and what we're trying to do is a waste of time. So I think I think how I see the way forward is like really reaching out to those countries that have historically been peace champions, you know, that we also know from the disarmament movement and disarmament UN multilateral space, and to really try and find those countries and work with them in pushing this kind of narrative forward. But I don't think that we will get far if we talk about militarization or militarism. I think we have to be a bit more concrete in terms of, yeah, military missions, military spending, stuff like that, yeah.
Thank you, Katrin, for joining. It's nice to see that you are all there together. Yeah, if there are no further comments, I don't know. I'm checking the chat very briefly. Yeah, I think. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Corinne. We still have a few minutes left.
Yeah, I was doubting a bit because the time is nearly up. Yes. Yeah, I guess I'm still a little bit puzzled. Perhaps the speakers that are at COP could still say a little bit more about what is. So if it is on the agenda now, I heard indeed Deborah saying maybe, you know, climate change will lead to demilitarization. I'm still a bit puzzled about what is the narrative going on at COP at the moment. In which way is military, even if it's not in those terms, like in which way is it addressed, if at all? Because, you know, the Gaza war also leads to a lot of claims for more arms, right? So I'm still not entirely sure what you're hearing there and what leads you to make certain. Yeah, so I mean, if you're not there, then you really have no clue. I can only read indeed newspaper articles. So maybe you could say a little bit more about, you know, what do you hear?
Well, the first thing to say, Corinne, is that I think what I was saying was that the conflicts that we're seeing, Ukraine and Gaza, are enabling us that are talking about, have been talking about the links between military spending, emissions, climate change, military spending, absence of climate finance. It's making it much easier to get that message across to whomever is in the room, number one. Whomever is in the room, I mean, from what I've seen the past couple of COPs, and I'm talking about official side events now, it's media, it's other NGOs, it's some government officials. And not by any means, not everybody in the room knows anything. So an awful lot of people coming into the room because they want to know more. And I completely endorse what Katrin is saying. I mean, personally, I never use the word militarization or demilitarization, because I think it's, unless you understand what you're talking about, it's a kind of a bit of a, we just talk about military missions, military spending. So that's in the room. In terms of it working its way up the agenda, I mean, I think we have a bit of expectation management here. It's very early days, but the fact that people are seeing Gaza, it's making it much easier for us to get the message across to other sectors that have not otherwise never engaged with this. So I think the energy and the kind of the cracks in the dam, if you like, are, that's a bad metaphor, but the energy that we need to be moving with is very much, I feel, the civil society energy at COPs, because they are the people that have pushed the loss and damage. They are the people pushing the non-proliferation, fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. Officially, what it does mean, what is happening is we are making a little bit of headway at that official level. So whether we are pushing for an IPCC report, which has come up in 2 events where the new guy, chair of the IPCC, was asked, will there be a military emissions report, special report? Can we have a special report on military emissions, IPCC special report? We've all submitted to the global stocktake. So we are kind of picking up these little bits as best we can, given that, you know, we are still a relatively small community doing this. So I don't know if that answers your question.
I also want to add a little bit to that from human rights discourse. When we talk about militarization and demilitarization, I think the linkage between the conflict and the climate crisis, it's also have been created a little bit at COP, at least the side events we were part of, because also to show it from a different perspective, center the human rights, but also we are talking about militarization. So, and bringing Gaza as a story, as the thing to think about from a different perspective, it's a bring that the understanding better and more practical to what we mean by militarization and demilitarization.
Great, thank you so much for your question. Also, it was a very, very interesting end, I would say, and I'm following the chat. It's amazing how people are engaging already, and I think this is really what we were hoping for. So come together, feel free to reach out to me or to the IPB and all to our partners anytime. And yeah, I think we can think that today was a very nice way to come together, and hopefully it's just the first step to more events and more collaboration. Thank you so much for being here with us today, and I think we can close now the stream and the recording. I don't know if we can still